All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive. You know we love to go deep on all sorts of things, and this one's particularly fascinating um, because you shared this podcast episode with me about soulmate manifestation.
Right.
And I got to say, I was intrigued. Like, can you really use visualization and intuition to, like, attract your soulmate?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It really is.
So let's dive into these techniques and see what we can uncover.
Okay, so what I think is so interesting about this is that it taps into this like universal longing that we all have for deep connection, right?
Yeah.
We're all looking for,
Absolutely.
that's special. But you know what I think is really cool is that these techniques that we're going to talk about aren't just, woo-woo out there. They actually have some roots in psychology. So for example, let's take visualization.
Okay.
So many people think that it's just kind of like
Daydreaming.
yeah, like just wishing on a star.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not quite like that. The source material that we're looking at here talks about actively creating detailed mental pictures of your ideal relationship.
Oh, so it's more like building a blueprint.
It's like building a blueprint in your mind. Exactly. And
Well,
so
then how does that actually work?
Yeah.
Like, how does just thinking about something make it more likely to happen?
So think about athletes who use mental rehearsal. They vividly imagine themselves, performing flawlessly, hitting that, game-winning shot, or, crossing the finish line first. And studies show that this actually improves their real-world performance. So they're training their brain to recognize opportunities and act decisively. And I think the same principle can be applied to spotting potential soulmates.
And so instead of just like passively waiting for the one to show up, you're actively training your mind to be ready.
Exactly. To be receptive.
To be receptive.
To the possibility when it arises.
So it's almost like we're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, right, because you're priming yourself to notice certain things, to be open to certain possibilities.
Right. And so the podcast that you shared even suggests some specific exercises.
Yes.
Like one is called the sacred space technique.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So it's more than just a fleeting thought, right? You're not just like, oh, I want this. You're really taking the time to create a full sensory experience in your mind.
Oh, wow.
Like, what do you see in this ideal relationship? What do you hear? What do you feel? What are the smells even?
So you're engaging all of your senses.
All your senses, exactly. And by doing that, you're actually strengthening the neural pathways in your brain that are associated with those positive emotions and those beliefs.
Kind of reminds me of method acting, where actors immerse themselves in a role.
It's similar, yeah.
And there's another exercise that this podcast talks about called the letter to the universe.
Yeah.
And it's basically where you're writing a letter, describing your soulmate and your life together. So what are your thoughts on that one?
I think putting your desires into words can be really powerful because it forces you to get clear about what it is you actually want. And it reinforces that intention. But the key here is that you can't just write it down. And then just hope for the best.
It has to be connected.
To action. You have to connect it to action. So I would ask, what are the steps that someone can take in their daily life that align with those desires?
Okay, so it's not just about writing it down. It's about actually like creating the life that attracts what you're looking for.
Exactly.
Okay. But then there's this whole other piece of it, which is intuition. The podcast also talks about tuning into our gut feelings.
Right. And this is where it gets really, really interesting. You know how many times have you ignored a gut feeling because something looked good on paper?
Oh, yeah.
But ultimately wasn't right for you?
All the time, yeah.
And our intuition might actually be picking up on subtle cues that we're not even consciously aware of.
Like what?
Like micro expressions or body language, things that signal compatibility or incompatibility.
Oh, so it's almost like our subconscious is processing information faster than our conscious mind can keep up with.
Yeah, our subconscious is really powerful.
And this reminds me of a time I was considering a new job, and everything on paper looked amazing.
Okay.
I'm talking like the salary, the title, the location.
Yeah, the whole package.
The whole 9 yards. But something just felt off. I kept getting this like nagging feeling that it wasn't the right fit.
Interesting.
Yeah. And did you listen to that feeling?
Yeah.
I tried to rationalize it away at first. I thought I was being silly, letting fear hold me back. But the feeling persisted. So I ended up declining the offer.
Wow.
And then a few months later, the company went through this massive restructuring. and the entire department that I would have been in was laid off.
Wow. So your intuition really saved you from a potentially negative
I know, yeah.
experience.
It's crazy.
Yeah. It's amazing how our intuition can do that sometimes. It can protect us.
Yeah.
Even when we don't even realize it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how can we get better at
Yeah.
recognizing and interpreting those intuitive nudges?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Especially when it comes to something as important as finding a soulmate.
Right, because this is a big decision.
Yeah.
We want to make sure we're following the right path.
So the podcast episode mentioned journaling and paying attention to recurring signs
Yes, those
or
are
symbols
great tools.
for tapping into your intuition.
So journaling allows us to process our emotions and kind of identify patterns.
Exactly. So you can start to see, okay, what are the things that are coming up for me over and over again? What are the themes?
And then paying attention to recurring symbols, whether it's in dreams
yeah,
or in everyday life.
absolutely.
That can also offer some insights
Right, into our
subconscious.
subconscious desires, our fears, things like that.
And some people even use tools like tarot cards or oracle cards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those can be helpful.
For self-reflection.
Uh-huh.
But isn't there a risk of like misinterpreting those signs?
That's a good point.
Like if I see a heart-shaped cloud, does that mean like my soulmate is right around the corner?
I think it's about looking for patterns and
Gotcha.
themes,
Okay.
not just isolated incidents. So yeah, you might see a heart-shaped cloud, and it might be a nice little reminder that
Yeah.
love is out there, but I wouldn't necessarily take it as like a literal sign
Right.
that you're about to bump into your soulmate.
Okay, so it's more about like the overall,
Uh,
the bigger picture.
Exactly. It's about the big picture.
Okay.
And I think it's also important to approach these tools with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Uh-huh.
You know, they can be catalysts for self-discovery, but they shouldn't dictate our decisions.
Right. It's about integrating those insights with logic
Yes.
and to conscious awareness.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance.
Now, the podcast episode also talks about something called psychic drawing to connect with soulmate energy.
Yeah, I've heard of this.
Sounds pretty mystical.
It does sound
Any thoughts on that?
a little woo-woo. Yeah, well, I think it's an interesting concept. The idea is to allow your hand to move freely across the paper while you're focusing on your soulmate, and then you interpret the resulting images.
So you're not trying to draw anything specific.
Yeah.
You're just letting your subconscious
You're letting go
kind of guide your hand.
and seeing what emerges.
Okay.
And, you know, while there's no scientific evidence to support psychic abilities,
Right.
I still think the practice could be valuable as a form of creative expression and self-exploration.
So even if we're not actually channeling, psychic energy, the act of drawing itself, might reveal something
It could, yeah.
about our subconscious desires.
Exactly.
Like, for example, if someone keeps drawing images of like intertwined lines or circles, it could suggest a longing for deep connection and unity.
Right, or if they're drawing a lot of hearts. It could indicate a desire for love and affection. So it's really about using creativity as a tool for uncovering what we might not even be consciously aware of.
And this brings us back to the importance of action.
Yes.
Manifestation isn't about passively waiting. It's about taking inspired action
Taking action.
when opportunities arise.
When the universe presents you with an opportunity.
So if someone is visualizing a soulmate
Yeah.
who shares their passion for hiking, they shouldn't just sit at home and meditate.
Exactly.
They should join a hiking club, go on group hikes, explore new trails on their own.
Put yourself out there.
By engaging in activities
Yes.
that are aligned with their desires, they're increasing their chances of encountering someone
Absolutely.
who shares those interests.
You're creating opportunities
Yeah.
for those connections to happen.
It's like you're sending out a signal
Yeah.
saying, this is who I am, and this is what I value.
Exactly. And the universe is listening.
But what about those moments when it feels like nothing is happening?
Yeah.
Despite all the visualization and the action taking, it's easy to get discouraged.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's completely understandable. You know, we're human. We want to see results.
Right.
But it's important to remember that manifestation is not a linear process.
Okay.
There are going to be ebbs and flows. There will be periods of intense activity. And then moments of quiet reflection.
It's like planting a seed. You need to nurture it, give it time to grow,
Give it time.
and trust that it will eventually blossom.
Trust the process.
And that brings to mind something we talked about earlier, the power of belief. If we're constantly telling ourselves, you know, we're unlucky in love,
Mm.
or that soulmates don't exist, Are we kind of unintentionally sabotaging our efforts?
Absolutely. Our subconscious mind is so powerful. And if we're holding on to these limiting beliefs about love, it's going to be harder to recognize and attract a healthy, fulfilling relationship.
Even if it's right in front of us.
Even if it's right there.
It's like we're wearing blinders.
Yeah.
That are preventing us from
Yeah.
seeing the possibility.
You're blocking yourself.
So part of manifesting a soulmate might also involve like challenging those negative beliefs and replacing them with
more empowering ones. It's about shifting your mindset from scarcity to abundance, from fear to openness.
And that can be a transformative journey in itself.
Absolutely.
Regardless of whether you find your soulmate or not.
It's about recognizing your own worthiness of love and cultivating self-love.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, the most important relationship we'll ever have is the one with ourselves.
I completely agree.
This whole conversation has been so eye-opening. I came in a little skeptical.
Yeah.
But now I'm starting to see the value in these techniques, even if you don't necessarily buy into like the more mystical elements.
It's fascinating how this approach blends psychology with spirituality. It's not just about wishful thinking. It's about actively shaping your beliefs and taking inspired action.
And recognizing that we have more agency in our love lives than we might realize.
Absolutely we're not. Just passive recipients of fate.
We can actively create the conditions for love to flourish.
And it all starts with self-awareness, understanding your needs, your desires, your values.
And trusting your intuition. That inner compass.
Yes, that inner guidance.
That can guide us towards what's truly right for us.
If something feels off, pay attention. If something feels exciting and aligned, explore it.
So for our listener out there, what's the one thing we want them to take away from this deep dive?
I think the most important takeaway is this. The journey to finding a soulmate is as much about self-discovery as it is about meeting that special person.
Okay.
It's about becoming the best version of yourself and creating a life that's aligned with your values and desires.
And who knows, maybe that's what ultimately attracts our soulmate to us. Maybe they're out there doing their own deep dive, working on themselves and getting ready for that moment when their paths align with ours.
Yeah, I love that thought. It's a reminder that we're all on this journey together, each of us with our own unique story to tell. And when those stories intersect in just the right way, magic can happen.
I love that. It's about staying open to possibilities, trusting the process, and believing that love is out there for you. This has been such a thought-provoking conversation. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive.
It is my pleasure.
Into the world of soulmate manifestation. And to our listener out there, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Have you ever tried any of these techniques? What are your beliefs about soulmates and manifestation? Share your insights with us. Until next time, stay curious, keep exploring, and never stop believing in the power of love.